All right. We have 3 speakers today that will cover different aspects of infrastructure. And the first one is Kristina Lindqvist. And she is here from Malmö University. She's a senior lecturer, and her main research focus are gender equality and gender studies, regional development planning, sustainability, mobility, and qualitative methodology. Today, she'll present infrastructure relationships with cases from her work in transport and mobility. So please give a warm hand to Kristina Lindqvist.
Thank you. And thank you for this nice invitation to this seminar. It's very nice to be here and having this opportunity to talk about a topic that is really important to me and which I put a lot of effort to in my daily work. I'm a human geographer, and as a human geographer, I'm not particularly specifically interested in technical stuff like infrastructures. I'm more concerned about how people engage with the technicalities that are made up in infrastructures in different ways. And I teach in urban planning, transport and mobility studies with a sustainability perspective, focusing mainly on equity, equality, and climate and environmental change. And today I'm talking about this infrastructure as a relationships and meaning maker in life. Yeah, that is a broad and a bit heavy title, but I will probably start in something that you think of as infrastructure in a more conventional way and end up in something more human. So what do we think of as infrastructure? Well, I tried to do some kind of info mining before coming here to really understand how we think or define what infrastructure is. And as a social scientist, as I said, I'm not interested in the technical artifact. I'm interested in how we build relationships and how we build structures to combine different parts of our society. I found out that the word infrastructure was invented or started to be used in the French language around 1850s. And about 100 years later, we found it in the Swedish language, mainly referring to stuff that is somewhere underneath the surface. But it's like fixed systems, like water pipes, sewer system, electricity, cables, that kinds of stuff, which provide a structure for transporting some stuff between different places. So I needed something to help me to better understand it. So I turned to Brian Larkin. He's a social anthropologist, and he defined infrastructure and also defining it or distinguishing it from technologies by the infrastructures are matter that enable the movement of other matter. What distinguishes infrastructure from technologies is that they are objects that create the ground on which other objects operate. And when they do so, they operate as systems. When I think about it, and my colleagues think about infrastructures, we also think about the decision making in defining what we need to invest in. We are interested in how we decide what to prioritize when we're building our cities and communities and societies. So today I would like to share some thoughts about this thinking of infrastructures as enabler and meaning maker. This is a photograph taken from Gothenburg, where they are building a huge infrastructure investment called Västlänken. This is about to enhancing transportation through the city and get rid of junctions and chokes in the city, and also enabling public transportation. What we see here is typically what we would refer to as infrastructures: houses, roads, machines, digging holes in the ground, and so on. But we also see, or what we doesn't see, what Matti was referring to, what we should be taking care of. It's also the political decisions that lies behind what to invest and what to put money into, and what that does to other kinds of infrastructure projects that could be invested in. The infrastructural turn, as we speak about it in social sciences, is that we acknowledge infrastructure not just as a technical system, but as a co-creator of the urban techno-social spatiality. So we have the urban, the technic, the socio, and the spatial systems that works together, which means that infrastructure is about the functionality of everyday urban life. It's about people and their struggles over public goods, such as access to work and education, transportation, clean air, water, and waste management. So infrastructure are complex socio-technical structures that involving corporate interests, regulatory standards, social expectations, and it's a combination of what we could call human software, hardware, intelligence. And this is how we can think about infrastructures besides the roads, which this is a very good illustration of. When we look about or look on how we invest in infrastructure, there has been a tremendous investment in hard infrastructures like road infrastructures. The question is that infrastructures is not equally accessible for everyone. And when we decide to build highways, we are taking resources that could be invested in public transport, for instance. So I think this is a very good illustration when we talk about sustainability and sustainable urban development, that when we look upon these kinds of investments, we are also denying investments in other kinds of infrastructures that could benefit other people. These infrastructures prioritize motorized vehicles, people who are allowed to drive and can use it for the daily purposes. But it also contributes to pollution, to soot, to emissions that infects people who are not using this kinds of infrastructure. So building this infrastructure means that we don't have the same amount of resources to invest in bicycle infrastructure or walking infrastructure, or reorganizing the urban land so we can have access to everyday important destinations in a more sustainable way. These are examples from what our prioritization on motorized vehicles and the hard infrastructures in road and transportation infrastructure. So the land-based traffic contributes about 30% to the CO2 greenhouse gases nationally and globally. And people are suffering from respiratory diseases caused by fumes, by soot, by particles from brakes and tires. People die from low-frequency noise from traffic, and children are especially exposed to these kinds of exposures. Women are also exposed more compared to men because they use public transport and bike and walk more than men do. This is based on how we have been planning and organizing urban land since the introduction of the private car as the main tool, as a normal way of thinking about how we were supposed to move around in space. And these two models, the Hoyt model and Burgess models, are models that was developed in US. And of course, they are not applicable exactly to Swedish conditions. But this is a way of illustrating how the central business district, the blue dot in the middle, and the different zones that have been planned and organized around the central business district has distributed services and housing and factories around the central core. Of course, we have, during history, tried to develop ways of managing transportation. So we have invested in public transit and public transportation to facilitate people's movement to reach everyday important destinations. And this is a map of the Stockholm subway. And this could be a map from anywhere, basically, around the world, where we have an underground or public transport system, because every city has a core in the central business district. So to reach the center core of the city is fairly easy. However, a lot of people doesn't need to go there on a daily basis. People need to go between different places out in the outskirts of the cities. And when we look upon these kinds of maps, we can identify that there are gaps where people actually have difficulties to reach places they need to go. In that case, we talk about transport poverty, and there is no final definition about what transport poverty is, but we talk about that there is no transport availability at all, that people don't have access to any transportation. We talk about the frequency of that transport that is actually available. We talk about affordability, that the cost for using the transport is too high, that there are too much time spent on traveling between different places you need to go to, and inadequate transportation, that you feel afraid or are threatened or are not feeling like you are entitled to this service when using it. In this case, people become important parts of creating sustainable solutions, where people actually become infrastructure to enhance and bring together different resources in systems that provide sustainability in different ways. We can talk about the women in big cities in Asia who are carrying water to the households to provide the households with water on daily basis. Which is organized as a kind of social infrastructure. We can talk about the taxi drivers in Mexico City or in Hanoi that are providing transportation for those communities that are not connected to the municipal or public transport system because the investments are not there. Their areas are described or defined as too dangerous to provide public transport with, and people become providers and enablers and part of social infrastructure that actually bring transportation facilities to these areas. This is an example of Skjutsgruppen, which is a community where you can ride with the car that is running. You sign up for a list, and people are taking tours on how to give ride when needed. Another example of social infrastructure, where people are super important in providing a system, is the walking school bus. And this is a way of organizing the children's trips to school collaboratively collaboratively, so they don't need to be chauffeured by the parents in cars. Or in these cargo bikes where the kids don't learn how to ride their own bikes anymore. When we use those public amenities, these systems that are built to be used by many, like public transport, or when we walk, have the possibility to choose to walk or use the bike to reach our destinations on a daily basis, we are claiming space from a very normative way of understanding how transportation should be organized as within the private car. Because since the mid-50s, when the private car started to become the main object, item, artifact for how we are supposed to move around in society, urban space has gradually, bit by bit, been taken away from those who walk and bike and also use public transport. So this is a kind, walking, biking, public transport is a kind of reclaiming that space to more sustainable solutions. And I would like to end this presentation with a quote by Abdulmalik Simone as he speaks of infrastructures of relationality as the ways in which relationships themselves constitute an infrastructure for inhabitation. And these relationships are not just social events or descriptors of exchanges and transactions. They are not simply embodiments of sentiments or vehicles for organizing work, expenditure, attention, and recognition. Rather, they are materials themselves to be articulated in various forms in order to construct circulations of bodies, resources, affects, and information. They are vehicles of movement and becoming ways of mediating and constantly oscillating intersections of various times, spaces, economies, constraints, and possibilities making up city life. And I think this is a really important aspects of how we can think about infrastructures. That is something that is inherently dependent on people's engagement, what we do, what we prioritize, which we don't prioritize at the same time. And I think that is my last slide. So thank you.